It is now being reported that authorities are investigating the sudden death of Hayden Panettiere for any signs of criminality, while the DEA, the Drug Enforcement Administration, has also jumped in as well. What does this tell us about what happened to the actress? Welcome to Sidebar, presented by Law&Crime. I'm Jesse Weber. Things are reportedly evolving in connection with the death of actress Hayden Panettiere. We started the week by learning that the 36-year-old was found Sunday unresponsive in cardiac arrest at this apartment that she was temporarily staying at in Greenville, South Carolina. First responders apparently tried to conduct these life-saving measures, but she was pronounced dead at the scene at 2:32 p.m. There was even reportedly dispatch audio where you can seemingly hear the word overdose. This is shocking. This is sad. This is incredibly tragic, especially when you consider the Nashville star had publicly addressed addiction in the past, a battle with postpartum depression in the past. And look, while the preliminary findings of the autopsy reportedly found no signs of trauma, and the Greenville Police Department indicated they didn't appear to find any evidence of foul play or suspicious circumstances, now we are getting word that things may be evolving, things may be escalating. TMZ has reported that law enforcement sources indicated to them that authorities are investigating whether a crime has been committed, namely because of how unexpected Hayden Panettiere's death is. And so law enforcement is investigating this seemingly at the same time as the coroner's office. And by the way, it's been reported that no cause or manner of death has been determined and that they're awaiting the toxicology results, right? The toxicology test, the toxicology report, which could take some time. And then you couple that with reporting that is now coming out by multiple outlets like Fox, CNN, the New York Times, that the DEA, the Drug Enforcement Administration, we're talking federal agency here, has joined the investigation. So the questions I have, the questions I think we all have are, why? What does this mean? What are they looking for? What is happening now behind the scenes? So I'm going to be bringing on a retired detective shortly to talk about that, what we should be thinking about. But first, let me just give you some more information, okay? So we have also learned that reportedly the Heroes actress on-again, off-again boyfriend, Brian Hickerson, and his brother Zach were at the scene, were at the apartment, that they placed the 911 phone call. CNN is claiming the police report indicates that an officer interviewed the brothers, with the police report saying, quote, "I spoke with Zach Hickerson first. He advised this was his brother's girlfriend." CNN is also reporting that Brian Hickerson allegedly showed officers a bag of medications at the apartment. This is per a police report. And by the way, TMZ has also reported that sources claim Narcan was found at this apartment too, which is used to treat an opioid overdose. Now, something to note about Brian Hickerson, if you're not familiar with him when it comes to Hayden Panettiere, he had been accused by the actress of domestic abuse, particularly in her memoir just a few months back. The New York Times was reporting that back in March, only a few months before Hayden Panettiere died, she had reportedly hired security to keep Hickerson away. That court documents reveal he was sentenced to 45 days in jail after pleading no contest to 2 felony domestic violence charges for injuring Panettiere. Panettiere wrote in her memoir, "What I never told them was that the abuse I'd endured didn't feel as bad as the thought of being alone." And by the way, Hickerson himself even came out after this memoir was published, apologized for what happened, saying it was true, that he was in a dark place that included issues with substances, and that it was a, quote, "terrible thing I did to her." In fact, let me call this out too, Hayden Panettiere's estranged mother, Leslie Vogel, has now spoken out too, telling NBC in part, quote, "This person in her life that we've been trying to get rid of for quite some time was with her at her death," and that was Brian Hickerson. Back in May, Hickerson called Vogel, quote, "one of the worst people I've ever met in my life." And there have been reports about what the relationship was like between Hayden Panettiere and her mother. But we go back to August 2022. So Hickerson was actually sentenced to several years of probation for violating his probation, had to complete a year-long domestic violence treatment program, attend AA, Alcoholics Anonymous, these meetings, complete dozens of anger management sessions. This is all according to court records. And there was even reporting that he even tried to get the court to reduce his felony convictions to misdemeanors, but without success. And that he even tried to do so as recently as last week. This is, again, according to court records, wasn't successful there either. The Hollywood Reporter apparently spoke with Mia Terrazas, who claims to have been Hayden Panettiere's neighbor in West Hollywood, says that she called 911 at least a half a dozen times to report these disturbances, says that she absolutely saw signs of domestic violence with respect to Hickerson, telling the outlet, quote, "I saw her leaving on a gurney. Brian was right next to her, and I asked her if she was okay, and it looked to me that she had suffered some type of trauma that looked to be battering. It was clear she was terrified." And then there's this. According to Page 6, police just showed up to Hickerson's grandmother's house in Greenville, South Carolina. Now, this was for a welfare check. The outlet claimed that Zach was home. Again, this is days after Hayden Panettiere's death, but we cannot say at this point definitively if this has anything to do with Hayden Panettiere's death, if it's any way connected to that investigation, but I'm just going to call this out anyway. To be clear, by the way, no one has been accused of a crime. No one has been charged with a crime in any way here. I just want to make that clear as we were reporting this right now. But before I go into more depth about the investigation, what we should be thinking about, what's happening behind the scenes, why the DEA is reportedly getting involved, I just want to give you an idea from a personal point of view. I want to give you an idea of what a profound loss Hayden Panettiere's death has left on those who knew her. And by the way, she's survived by her daughter Kaya, who she shared with ex-fiancé Vladimir Klitschko. So actor Tim Allen, for example, posted to X, quote, "I am shocked and so sad at the passing of Hayden Panettiere. She played my daughter in the movie Joe Somebody. The fondest memories of that movie were moments around her. She is a wonder, and my prayers are with her family." Nashville co-star Connie Britton posting online with a photo of them saying, "This was Hayden, bursting with brilliance, shining so bright. I have no words for this sad song, just heartbreak. I love you, girl. Sleep easy now." Actor Justin Chatwin telling Fox News Digital, quote, "Well, I met her back in her 20s on Heroes, and then I met her again on this film, Sleepwalker. We reunited, and she's just got one of the biggest hearts of anyone that I've worked with, and she's super sweet. But I noticed the difference in, life had taken a toll on her, and she had a lot of unfortunate incidents. At the end of the day, you go home from a warm, fun movie set where everybody's telling you you're great, and you're alone in your house, and you still got to order your coffee and eat your dinner, and it's a really lonely career. But on set, she was super fun, and I really loved having deep conversations with her." Actress Misha Barton telling Fox News Digital, quote, "I am heartbroken by the news of Hayden's passing. Hayden spoke candidly about her struggles with depression, something no one deserves to endure. Her passing at such a young age, with so much life still ahead of her, is profoundly heartbreaking." Heroes co-star Masioka posted on X that he was absolutely heartbroken to hear about Hayden. "I had the privilege of working closely with her, and I'll always remember her for her beautiful spirit, immense talent, and the joyful energy she brought to everything she did and the people around her. She was way wiser beyond her years and now gone too soon. My heart goes out to her family and everyone who loved her. Rest in peace, Hayden." Actress Emma Roberts, who worked with Panettiere on Scream 4, writing, "Rest in peace, my sweet friend. You are so loved, and you will be forever missed." Actress Kim Cattrall, who worked with Panettiere on 2005's this Disney film Ice Princess, wrote, "Rest in peace, sweet Hayden, gone far too soon." And going back to Vladimir Klitschko, her ex-partner, ex-fiancé, former heavyweight boxing champion, posted on X, "Our family is going through a time of profound shock and grief. The announcement of Hayden's tragic death saddens me deeply. She left this world far too soon. Hayden was, although no longer my partner, an important part of my life and the mother of our daughter Kaya. She built an incredible career through immense talent while also facing the darker sides of a very demanding industry. Nothing will erase the times we shared or the place she had in our lives. To our daughter Kaya, I will always speak of her mother with respect and make sure she remembers the person she was. I extend my deepest condolences to Hayden's parents, her friends, and her fans who are also grieving today. Young and talented people like Hayden should not leave this world so soon. I ask everyone to please respect our family's feelings and privacy during this incredibly difficult time. For now, this is all I wish to say. Thank you to everyone who is supporting my family and expressing their sincere condolences. Rest easy, Hayden. May you find eternal peace." Okay, let me bring in retired detective, law enforcement instructor Matt Irvine. Love having Matt on whenever we have these kind of strange investigations, what's happening behind the scenes. Matt, thanks for taking the time. This is just a tragedy on so many different fronts, but I do want to talk about the investigative aspect of it. Why bring the DEA on board?
Yeah, that's a very interesting question because the DEA typically does not get involved in cases that appear to be suspected overdoses, even if there is possibly some suspicion of foul play. I would expect that the reason the DEA is involved is they believe that the substances that may have contributed to Hayden Panettiere's death um, may be connected to a person or organization that is already the subject of their investigation.
You know, a lot of people have already been saying Matthew Perry. Is that what you're talking about? That whatever the and by the way, we don't know as I said, we don't know the cause and manner of death. We don't know the circumstances here. But you're saying you bring the DEA on board if if they're now trying to find the suppliers, the people who, if there were substances there, who gave those substances. What resources does the DEA bring into an investigation? What do they do?
Well, the DEA has massive resources. They have tremendous forensic capacity, and this is a case certainly where it appears that they are already looking at communications, looking at devices. The DEA, if they've already got a person or organization under investigation, has a lot of intelligence on that target that they can leverage to support this investigation. I don't know what the law is in South Carolina in terms of being able to charge somebody with homicide for causing the death of another person through the provision of illicit substances. But that is certainly a possibility. And the Matthew Perry case would be the most famous example.
How do they work hand in hand with local law enforcement? How does it work? And because they have competing not competing, but they have differing goals, right? I mean, what the DEA is looking for is different than what local law enforcement is looking for.
Possibly. I mean, a joint investigation is a fairly common practice. Generally, the DEA, like the FBI, works very well with local law enforcement. It's a complementary approach rather than a competitive approach.
When I said authorities are investigating if a crime was committed, if there was some sense of illegality, particularly because her death was so sudden, what are they looking for? Who are they interviewing? How does it work in terms of trying to see if a crime was committed?
Well, there's a couple of ways that a crime could be involved here. I mean, it is certainly not immaterial that she died in the company of Brian Hickerson, who has been convicted of felony abuse against her. When women die, when they are murdered, it is very often by intimate partners. So absolutely that possibility needs to be part of any state investigation. Beyond any possible culpability on Mr. Hickerson's part, there is the question of, again, if this is a case where she died because she was provided with some kind of illicit substance, where do those substances come from? And is it possible to hold criminally accountable the person or persons that provided her with those substances? So there's really kind of two fronts in terms of looking at criminality: the possible involvement of the intimate partner or other persons that were actually present at the time that she potentially overdosed, and then kind of one step out, where do those substances come from? And can the person or organization that provided those substances be held criminally liable?
But why do authorities initially say no trauma, no suspicious circumstances, no evidence of foul play? What would lead them to say that, and how do you reconcile that with the new reporting that they're investigating to make sure a crime wasn't committed?
Well, both things are possible. When they say no evidence of foul play, no trauma, that simply suggests that there was no indication that she was beaten, stabbed, shot, or somehow violently killed. That does not mean that her death, whether it be an accidental overdose or somebody intentionally providing her with enough drugs to kill her, is not a separate crime. So the initial scene did not appear, apparently, to show a violent death. That doesn't mean that the death is not potentially a homicide.
Just to be clear, again, I'm going to say this again. No one has been charged with a crime. No one has been accused of committing a crime. No one has been accused of committing a crime in connection with Hayden's death. However, generally speaking, how would you know whether somebody purposely made someone overdose or tricked them or spike something? Or, I mean, what would be some potential evidence there?
Again, they're looking closely at communications, and that may show some plan, either a plan on her part potentially to take substance A when the toxicology ultimately shows that she died from an ingestion of substance B. That could suggest that somebody gave her something that she didn't intend to take, that she didn't have the tolerance for, that was much more potentially lethal. than whatever it was she intended to ingest. If that was done intentionally, that could be a crime. Um, it's also possible, again, that the persons with her had no knowledge that she was ingesting something that could potentially be fatal, but the person or organization that provided those substances knew or should have known that she was being provided with something that could kill her. And again, if you're obtaining drugs, particularly in this day and age, and particularly if you're a celebrity, you're not driving down to some sketchy corner. You're doing it probably through electronic communications.
Let me ask you this. So it all comes down to the toxicology test, the toxicology report, right? I mean, like what what does that testing entail? How long does something like that take? And how will we find out the results of that?
I imagine, again, I don't know the practices in South Carolina, but I would imagine that once the toxicology is done, that report should be publicly available, just like autopsy reports are generally publicly available. The exception would be if there is an ongoing criminal investigation and there's a reason to keep those findings secret, either because they don't want to tip off the targets of the investigation or because they intend to present the findings to a grand jury and don't want to taint that process. If either of those things are true, it could be a while before we find out in order to protect the integrity of an investigation.
And generally speaking, does it take a while for those tests to come back? Does it take a while for them to fully do a complete evaluation of what was in her system?
It's typically a matter of weeks. Again, they can rush things, and the process itself doesn't take too terribly long. It's just a question of kind of what their procedure is in terms of bumping the line, to be crude about it, in a high profile case.
If it's true that Narcan was present there, what does that tell you?
So it's interesting. I noted that, and what's not clear to me is whether the Narcan was brought to the scene by emergency medical personnel or whether it was already on scene. If it was already on scene, it's fairly common now for people who use central nervous system depressant drugs and opiates to have Narcan handy because it is a lifesaver. Uh, Overdoses, particularly from fentanyl, have been reduced dramatically, at least deaths from overdoses have been reduced dramatically because users have access to and use Narcan. So again, if this was something that was planned, that they would have Narcan on hand is not surprising. And obviously, emergency medical personnel carry Narcan with them because they respond routinely to overdoses, particularly on fentanyl and other CNS depressant drugs.
You know, look, we're still trying to understand what happened. Variety is reporting that a director, Griff First, who directed one of Hayden Panettiere's final films, said that her team had asked him to participate in an intervention for her after they filmed that movie last year. So, you know, look, this is, as I mentioned, she's been open about her struggles in the past, and we're trying to understand it. You had talked about Hickerson. I mentioned Hickerson before, I mentioned his brother there, both of them there. So I feel like law enforcement, they spoke to them initially, but do they have to investigate them further? How far back do they go? What questions do they ask? Do they get a subpoena for, or a warrant rather, for their electronic devices? What goes on with the Hickersons?
So, as I said earlier, I think you have to look at them, or at least look at Brian Hickerson as a person of interest in this case until he can be ruled out, simply because he's been convicted of harming her. Uh, and again, just statistically, when women are killed, it is very often by intimate partners. So he's an obvious person of interest unless and until he can be eliminated. To that end, they should be interviewing him if he's willing to talk, and they should absolutely be looking at electronic devices. They might also get a warrant for his physical premises, for where he lives and for his vehicle. Again, this is not saying that he is guilty of anything. It's just saying that a thorough investigation should absolutely consider him as a person of interest.
Was there anything unusual to you about the police report? Was it the idea that, you know, they were there, called 911? Brother said this was Hayden Panettiere's boyfriend. We know that it's a lot more complicated than just that, but anything from the police report strike you as strange?
Not at first glance. You know, a lot of folks have been making a lot of noise about the fact that Brian Hickerson did not appear particularly emotional until he was notified that Hayden Panettiere was gone. I think that's a red herring. People who are experiencing traumatic events react in any number of ways. I've seen people be hysterical. I've seen people be catatonic. I've seen people go from one to the other in a matter of minutes. And how you react in hour one is different than how you react on day two. So I think we make a mistake in trying to read into his reaction something that speaks to his potential involvement. There's just no one way to react to trauma.
I thought they said he did show emotion, but maybe I read it wrong.
My recollection was that the brother was quite emotional, and that
Okay.
Hickerson was kind of, it sounds like, fairly flat in his affect
Okay.
until he was notified of her passing. And again, that is a perfectly normal and potentially perfectly innocent response to trauma.
How much does the family get to know about the investigation? How much are they kept abreast before the public, before the media? How much are they kept in the loop about what's going on, whether it's from the feds or local law enforcement?
That is always a tricky balance for investigators because, on the one hand, you want to respect that these are people who are grieving, who have lost a loved one, and who deserve the respect and empathy and consideration from the investigative team. On the other hand, you don't want to provide information to the family that could taint the investigation. And at least when it comes to her mother, she is a very vocal and public figure. So you could probably assume that if you tell her something, it's going to show up on TMZ, within a matter of hours, and that could be potentially very prejudicial for an investigation.
Yeah. Look, I don't know. I don't know her. I don't know anything that much about her. I know there's a lot of reports about her, but relationship with Hayden Panettiere. But you also hope if family's given information, they won't, speak about it. But I don't know. I don't know. I don't know her or anybody else in this case. I'm trying to figure this out. I just think it's so sad. It's so tragic. She was so young. And while we develop the circumstances of this, I keep thinking about her daughter, who has to now navigate this and growing up without her mom. It's really, really heartbreaking. Matt Irvine, I really appreciate you coming on to talk about this, as I always do. So thank you, sir.
Thank you very much. I'm sorry that we have to talk about this tragedy.
And that's all we have for you right now here on Sidebar, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us. And as always, please subscribe on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you should get your podcasts. You can also check us out on NBC's Peacock as well. If you want to follow me, X, Instagram, my News Nation show, Jesse Weber Live, Monday through Friday, 11 p.m. Eastern. See you next time, everybody.